bowl season is here. Moving on to Monday, January 2nd. These slated games typically take place on New Year's Day, but with that coming on a Sunday this year, we get them on the 2nd. Starting with the RalioQuest Bowl, Mississippi State taking on Illinois. Seeing the Bulldogs move up to a 2.5-point favorite here in this spot. Total, as you might expect in an Illinois game, pretty low at 46. So obviously, kind of the elephant in the room here. A lot of tragedy in that Mississippi State program right now. Mike Leach, their head coach, passed away a few weeks ago. Very tough situation here. Zach Arnett, their defensive coordinator, taking over as the interim head coach. I don't really know from a betting perspective, how you handicap that. On the one hand, that's their leader. But at the same time, it could serve as a pretty good motivation spot for Mississippi State. This line was closer to a pick, and Mississippi State is taking some money. So clearly some other people agree with that as well. Something I'm interested to see from this Mississippi State team with Arnett at the helm is how true do they stay to that air raid scheme. I doubt Mississippi State's going to get more aggressive than we've seen them this year here in the bowl game. I haven't been a huge fan of this offense throughout the year. Will Rogers didn't have the same kind of year he had in 2021. 6.6 yards per attempt. I know it's an air raid scheme. I know you're going to dump it off a lot, but he's also completing less than 70% of his passes, which for an air raid guy is not great. So I haven't loved what I've seen from that aspect. Also, number one wide receiver in the portal. Their offensive line has kind of underperformed this year as to how I viewed them preseason. So I don't love this Mississippi State offense. And, I wouldn't be surprised if we see them run the ball just a bit more here in the bowl game. As far as Illinois, there are some metrics that would tell you that, hey, this is the best defense in college football this year. They're great against the run. They got dudes in their secondary. Now, obviously, strength of schedule and things of that nature would probably tell you that probably doesn't end up being true. I will say they aren't at full strength themselves. Sidney Brown, one of their star defensive backs, brother of Chase Brown, who we'll get to in a second, he opted out for this game. They had another starting defensive back opt out. So I wouldn't say the secondary is fully intact. I just don't know how much Mississippi State's going to challenge Illinois in the vertical passing game. It's just a dink and dunk sort of system. On the other side, though, I mentioned Chase Brown, key running back for the Illini this year. And so Brett Bielema will be without that true bell cow of a running back in this game. With Brown out, I think Mississippi State's going to have their way against the run. If there's one thing you can count on Mississippi State doing, it's stopping the run. Just go watch that Egg Bowl. Jason Quinshawn Judkins, Zach Evans, really high-quality backs like that basically had their way in that facet of the game. But Tommy DeVito has actually had a pretty good year for Illinois. 70% completion. He's still only a little bit above 7 yards per attempt. So once again, not a huge threat in the deep passing game. I do think Mississippi State can be had a little bit in their secondary, but as I handicap this game, there's one critical element that I would give Mississippi State a pretty big edge on. That's finishing drives. Dogs have had 41 red zone trips this year, 32 touchdowns, nearly 80%. That is an elite rate of finishing drives in the red zone. You look at Illinois, 50 red zone chances, 23 touchdowns. So there's a pretty big disparity here. I don't know if it's enough for me to lay the 2.5 with Mississippi State per se, because I do think otherwise these teams are evenly matched. My stronger lean, and I almost got to the window with this, not going to be an official one unit play, but I do have a pretty heavy lean towards the under here. Not a lot of explosive plays through the air. We mentioned Chase Brown. Illinois is really centerpiece of that offense. He's not going to play. Why I couldn't get to the window with this, and kind of what I talked about at the beginning, I don't know from a pace perspective, just from a game plan perspective, what Mississippi State looks like without Mike Leach. They were a very fast-paced team. They're going to throw the ball a lot. Does that remain the same? We've even seen Illinois this year use some pace to their advantage. I will say later in the year, they definitely slowed things down, kind of how you'd think of a Brett Bielema team, but there's enough from a pace perspective. Keep me off this already low total. From a matchup perspective, I agree with it. I just think there's going to be more possessions here than I'm comfortable with when playing an under this low. So I did lay off of the under. As far as the side, like I said, Mississippi State's going to finish drives better, but otherwise pretty evenly matched game. Heavy lean towards the under here to start us off on Monday.